Solidyne P41 Plus is faster than the Z440, Lexa NM790 and the Samsung 980 Pro, which just shows that the Solidyne magic that they do on their drives and the random read and write speeds on there is really working. P44 Pro is right on the top, like the best drive you can get for that, what I have tested. Obviously I'd love to test a lot of the other drives there as well. So Western Digital, Seagate, ADATA, all of you guys there, please reach out to me so I can add your drives into the test here as well. But the P44 Pro is faster than the 990, which is the largest I have seen in this. This is like a NAS rated kind of terabyte rated spec for that drive, which means that every single day for the next 5 years, you can fill the drive fully, like 1 terabyte, pretty much 998 or something like that, gigabytes on the drive, and then be completely fine if you...
The new Z790 Dark Kingpin motherboard from EVGA features a 14-layer PCB, 21-phase VRM, PCIe Gen 5, Wi-Fi 6, and a host of features to unlock the full potential of Intel's new 13th Gen CPU. To see the complete list of features of the Z790 Dark Kingpin motherboard from EVGA, follow the link in the description below. Not in today's video, we actually got a whole couple video series coming where we do a complete used eBay type of build. It's going to be if you're running older hardware, how much limitation do you have before you start to just bottleneck your system, specifically your graphics card, where you then are leaving money on the table. Now let's talk about Intel and AMD first. 7000 series and AM5 socket is a forward-facing platform. So that means they're gonna have longer compatibility into the future with future CPUs. So one of the things you have to consider if you're gonna go with Intel is right now you might be compatible with previous generation platform hardware, motherboard, RAM and such. Forward-facing stuff in any generations moving into the future, I'm sure are you planning on keeping this system? Most people keep their systems 5 years plus. One of the trends I'm noticing a lot of the emails that I'm getting is people that are building their first system in the last 7 to 10 years. Now 10 years ago, we were talking about FX processors, we were talking about Devil's Canyon 4790K CPUs. I mean, we have come a long way in the last 10 years. So what you choose is going to be a massive increase in performance than what you've seen in the past. Even if you went entry-level hardware, you went like 12600K, 10600K, and compared it to anything you would have 10 years ago, or 7 years ago even, it is going to be a massive uplift. Motherboard, a BIOS update would give you compatibility for the newer CPUs, dropping compatibility for the older CPUs, which is fine because most of the time people don't go backwards in hardware. And not to mention the older CPUs like 3000 series, 2000 series, and even now 5000 series are only gonna get cheaper as time goes, depending on what your use case is. For the most part, I mean, it's not been that long ago where 4 cores and 8 threads was all anybody needed to get anything done in their life. You don't need a 32 more cores, and the more RAM and stuff you have, the more availability you have the resources for those VMs. A lot of people run VMs to run things like servers and Plex servers and all that sort of stuff. So if you don't have any interest in that, and you're just looking at doing general computing, maybe some workloads, maybe some live streaming and some video editing and such, with encoding happening now on graphics cards, and it's been happening that way for years, but now that people are really starting to pay attention to it, that's gonna be more your concern when it comes to CPU. So unless you're doing stuff that specifically requires a high core count, and here's the thing, if you work in that environment or you live in that environment, you already know this video wouldn't be for you. This is for the person that's looking at, I'm upgrading my home PC that I want to play some games on, and I haven't really looked at this stuff in 5, 7, 10 years. Something like a 600 series from Intel, 12600K, 11600K, 10600K, like I've said, they're gonna be plenty fast, plenty of cores to do your job, plenty of cores to get your daily tasks done, and more than enough to play games and such. On AMD, it's the same thing. Ryzen 5, maybe 2 NVMe drives. Even PCIe Gen 3 NVMe right now would be like, if you're running a SATA SSD, or God forbid, a hard drive, any NVMe, PCIe Gen 3, 4, 5, doesn't matter, is going to give you the biggest performance uplift and usability in your system that you have ever seen. If you are still watching this video and you have never experienced an SSD, and I know you exist, I know you're out there, comment down below, I'm that guy. All you need to honestly make your system feel better is just even a SATA SSD, which has a max read write of 550 megabytes a second. PCIe Gen 3 NVMe, over 3,000 megabytes per second. PCIe Gen 5, almost 7. A 500 gigabyte NVMe SSD in your system to run your OS and your most commonly used programs. That alone, even on an old system, would be the biggest improvement you could possibly do. But when it comes to motherboards, I mean, let's talk about AMD for a second here. You got B650, X670, and X670E. So you got the Extreme 670 Extreme. Again, feature sets that most of the time aren't going to mean anything to anyone unless you're out there building the biggest, baddest rig that you can to do some overclocking and just flex muscle. A B-series motherboard is more than enough for just about anybody ever when it comes to AMD's rig. And I'm talking about previous generations, more storage, better case, better power supply, whatever. When it comes to graphics cards, nobody needs an RTX 4090. Nobody. Even those people are like, but I work in the most demanding of workstation scenarios, then you need a quad and games that you play. So if you were to say, I have a 1080p panel and all I play is CSGO, well, running an RTX 4090, that's not gonna do you any favors whatsoever. Wait for the 70 series and 60 series cards to come out. If you're running 1080p, even 1440p, getting something like a 3060 Ti or something like a 6700 XT on AMD or any 6600 XT, going to give you plenty of performance to play your games without breaking the bank. But speaking of resolution, ultra-wides are starting to make a rise in popularity. For a while there was 1080p vertical height. In fact, we should start doing some ultra-wide benchmarks just so people can see what the actual performance hit is with those extra horizontal pixels. The nice thing about graphics cards is, as long as you don't underspec your CPU and your motherboard too far, you can always upgrade the graphics card later and get that uplift immediately. However, if you go super entry on your CPU and your motherboard, then you're gonna be limited to how much graphics card you can put in there before you start bottlenecking it, which means you paid for FPS you're not getting, period. Now, all of this I'm mentioning NVIDIA right now is because we're still waiting for RDNA 3's launch coming in. They're gonna start at the top of the stack and it will take time for those mid-range cards to come out. So if you're looking at a mid-range build or an average like $1,000 to $1,500 build, you're gonna be looking at 3000 series anyway, because you can't even get a 4090 for less than about $2,000 at the time of making this video. But when it comes to picking your platform, it really is gonna depend on, I guess a lot of your preferences in the programs that you run. The nice thing about this though, is this is one of the first times where in the past, talking about AMD versus Intel, it usually was like Intel was the most stable in Windows environment. It was the most compatible with programs not having any sort of weird conflicts with the instructions and the way that AMD would handle it. We always would say Intel had the best compatibility and overall had the better performance than AMD. But that's not, even though the Intel on average, the 13th series, is holding higher clock speeds than AMD, and these are the highest clock speeds ever seen by AMD, up to 5.8 gigahertz. The AMD still